You're listening to the Dead Presidents Podcast.
And this, my friend, means war.
Presidential war.
Presidential war. What is it good for? Intellectual stimulation. Say it again now. Presidential war. What is it good for? Best game in the nation. Presidential war.
Welcome to the Dead Presidents Podcast. I'm James J. Hamilton.
And I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
And we're here with another installment of our epic presidential card game.
We got our cards dealt out, our boots tied tight. We hope we don't get in a fight.
But we will, because that's the nature of presidential war.
Indeed, 'tis.
A civil fight.
Absolutely. And we're going to begin it right here, right now, with the first flip of the first hand, which reveals James Madison.
And I've got Teddy Roosevelt.
Aha.
The category, post-presidential accomplishments.
Wow. Well, we've talked about former presidents becoming kind of wizened old sages. That was kind of the Madison role here. Not anything that jumps to mind as like a huge post-presidential accomplishment.
Yeah, he was pretty retired. He served in the Virginia Constitutional Convention in the 1820s. Served on the board of the University of Virginia, I think. Spoke out against nullification, 1832.
So he continued to be a voice. And he took an active part in some local Virginia
he
things.
continued to hang on to the notes of the Constitutional Convention, observing the pact not to publish them until after his death.
But on the other hand,
Teddy
you have
Roosevelt.
a wild adventure in regards to the post-presidential accomplishments of Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, he was pretty
Well,
active.
his whole life was an adventure, but
Yeah, he was a nonstop action hero.
with the post-presidency, he did some of his wildest journeys and biggest adventures. He survived a bullet during a campaign for re-election, as we've discussed.
Yeah, immediately upon leaving the presidency, he went on a huge African safari. They acquired like thousands of animal specimens for the Smithsonian, all kind of hunting with like all the big game of Africa.
Yeah.
Then he came back. He was, outside of the reach of civilization for a while, and then came back and wasn't too thrilled with his handpicked successor, Taft, and what he was doing. Decided to run against him as a third-party candidate under the Progressive Party, the Bull Moose Party, as he called it.
That's right.
I don't know. That was something I felt in reading the Edmund Morris 3-volume biography of him, that his third-party run, him and Taft both, I don't think came off too well in that. It seemed like their differences were, I don't know, not as deep as you'd think would be necessary to split their party.
Yeah.
And that they probably should have tried harder to work it out rather than running against each other.
Indeed.
But TR, he
They
made
didn't do
it.
their party any favors.
No. And then I think the Progressive Party felt like the TR kind of abandoned it after his presidential run was over, because it was trying to be like a legit party. And after he wasn't going to become president anymore, he kind of left it hanging.
Yeah, well,
And it became, it was more of a cross-party movement rather than its own party.
it didn't stop him from his traveling and his adventures.
Yeah, then he went on the epic
Amazon trip where he very nearly died.
Yeah, they went out into uncharted, like discovering like a new river in the Amazon rainforest.
Bear in mind, he's carrying a pretty fresh bullet in his chest at the time.
Yeah, that was, episode 4, Top 5 Failed Assassin number 2, John Schrank. Teddy Roosevelt shot in the chest during that presidential run, continued to give his speech, only went to the hospital afterwards, and lived. Yeah, then in the Amazon he got like a tropical fever and was on the verge of death. He lost like 50 pounds or something by the time he made it back. A few other members of the expedition did die.
And if you're remarking to yourself, like, well, that doesn't really sound like an accomplishment. It's not really an accomplishment. He lost a bid for the election. He went to the Amazon and almost died. Well, he's writing about all this.
Yeah, he published books about all those things.
And the things he got for the Smithsonian, shit. Pretty much we're flogging a dead horse at this point. The hand is Roosevelt's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he went on to advocate for American involvement in World War I. His son ended up dying in that war. Yeah, he had a very, very active post-presidency. So we'll have him. He's going to take this hand.
Indeed.
We'll move on to the next hand. I've drawn Thomas Jefferson.
I've drawn Woodrow Wilson.
The category: Strength of Presidential Appointments. Well, Jefferson has some big ones. He's got Madison appointed as Secretary of State.
Yeah, absolutely. There's more Jefferson jumping out to me than Wilson at this point. But as always, we'll reference our complete book of U.S. presidents.
Yeah, Jefferson also appointing Lewis and Clark.
Right.
That's pretty big. He appointed Monroe and Robert Livingston, who negotiated the Louisiana Purchase. Who else was in his cabinet? Albert Gallatin was huge. He became Treasury Secretary under Jefferson and then served into Madison's second term, I think. He was a huge figure. Henry Dearborn served as Secretary of War. Later was a general in the War of 1812.
Yeah, I had two names come to mind with Wilson, and I was just checking to see if there was anybody else that I had, a remote knowledge of, and unfortunately I don't, outside of these two. Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan, obviously a very important figure in American politics.
Yeah, I had a few.
Again, I'd like to reference the truly underrated and pretty original band from Pittsburgh, the War Shots and the Would Be President series. Songs about people that ran for president and lost, that didn't become president or hadn't been president. They do a pretty stand-up job with that. You can learn all about William Jennings Bryan.
Yeah, you ran, 3 times?
That's correct.
Oh.
And the other person of note was William G. McAdoo, Secretary of the Treasury. During the First World War, he was the guy running the railroads.
Yeah.
Oh, here. I actually didn't remember this. He married the president's daughter, Eleanor Wilson, in a White House ceremony in 1914.
Wow.
sought the Democratic presidential nomination in 1920 and 1924. Didn't work out for him.
Kind of can't imagine a cabinet member marrying the president's daughter nowadays.
It's pretty wild. But William Jennings Bryan, like a truly storied career, he could be an episode in and of himself.
Yeah.
But, yeah, check out the War Shot song on him and all of their other work on would-be presidents. But, based on our examination here, I think we got to give this one to old TJ.
Yeah, he had some major heavy hitters among his appointments.
Moving along.
I've drawn Abraham Lincoln.
And I've drawn Dwight D. Eisenhower.
The category, who would you pick first in flag football?
Ooh, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm going to go Eisenhower because he played.
Yeah, they were both in our top 5 most athletic presidents.
Yeah.
I think Lincoln was number 4, Eisenhower 5, but Eisenhower was in there for football.
Right. That famous game. Going up against Jim Thorpe, one of the greatest athletes, period.
Carlisle Indian School, the best football team in the world at the time.
Yeah.
In the pre-NFL days.
Yeah, this is a good one. Lincoln is
He's tall and athletic.
Tall,
I'll bet he probably could have been a good football player if that was big during his time. You know,
I think based on this one, I'd have to give it to Eisenhower just for his football.
Yeah, me too. And he also, he became a football coach on Army bases, and so he could be the player coach of your flag football team. He'd know all the strategy and X's and O's.
Lincoln, proving not to be the big buck of this particular lick.
Nope, that's Ike's job.
Goes to Ike.
Next hand, I've got Andrew Jackson.
I've got Millard Fillmore. And we are going to do battle over the economy. Well, during Jackson's presidency,
the
economy.
I mean, it was pretty great. It was, it was on the upswing, though that turned out to be the outer limits of a bubble inflating.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, unfortunately, it was poor Martin Van Buren that would have to deal with the end result of Jackson's economic policies. So, that's tricky ground. The economy when Millard Fillmore was president? Well, it's really not too shabby.
Yeah, it's the post that's during the gold rush era.
Yeah,
he's president.
Period going on.
When did he become president? 1850 upon
correct.
Taylor's death.
Yep.
So he's 50 to 53. Wonder. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily give Jackson high marks because while the panic didn't happen until afterwards, he killed the bank. He issued the Specie Circular of 1836 that kind of helped the bubble burst.
There was some wishy-washy stuff going on there, whereas with Millard Fillmore, we pretty much just had mainly domestic, but Perry's mission to Japan, a foreign issue.
Yeah, that helps open up some trade.
Yeah, Perry's mission wouldn't be fulfilled until Franklin Pierce was president, but it was Fillmore. Fillmore dispatched him, and then Pierce sealed the deal with that one. So that was a little bit of intra-party teamwork, I suppose, between those two.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the economy wasn't too shabby during Fillmore, where under Jackson it's starting to get a little bit of how the hell are things going to go? Like, can you imagine if there was, like, Wall Street speculation during the Jackson presidency? How fucking batshit crazy that would
there
be?
basically was. That's what Western land speculation was at the time.
That's true.
That
True.
was the, the stock market, basically.
Yeah,
and
it just didn't have the clanging bell.
Yeah.
And this sad, smarmy people.
Yeah, and, within weeks of Jackson leaving office is when it kind of, the shit hit the fan.
Yeah. And, I mean, literally weeks. It was just over 2 weeks later that the bubble popped. And we were in the worst depression we'd seen. Now, we had one under Monroe, as we've talked about in episode 5. But what happened here, quite a bit worse.
Yeah. And some of his stuff...
Unfortunately, Van Buren's actions to curb it just resulted in another panic. So...
Yeah. And Jackson, he took a principled stand against the bank, and there's some... I guess there's something to the anti-bank stance, but... Yeah. They kind of left a void there that wasn't filled until the Polk Independent Treasury established. Yeah. I wonder if why they didn't try something like that during Jackson, because he seemed to have...
Well, Van Buren tried the...
Well, that was later, but I would think that how come Jackson didn't have the alternative ready? I guess they maybe didn't think they needed one until the panic happened and...
I think...
showed how they needed something.
Well, I think that whole, point there... that, we kind of made in the Jackson episode was, his whole thing was to kill the bank. He didn't have, well, what do you do then? And it's
Well, yeah, I guess a lot of people didn't think you needed central banking.
Yeah.
But you kind of...
to the states, but it gets overwhelming.
It's all state... all the state banks are irresponsible banks as well.
Indeed.
No single one of them is powerful enough to exert the kind of corrupt influence over the government that Jackson was afraid of, but they were also can't coordinate national, fiscal policy the way a central bank did.
That's it. And, in the years after Jackson's and Van Buren's kind of debacle, it pretty much took Polk setting up the independent, or as he liked to call it, the Constitutional Treasury, to begin to see an upswing. And then the gold rush and the Mexican-American War helped the economy. Obviously, we know from World War II that that's what it took to get us out of the Great Depression, really. Mm-hmm. Nothing helps the economy like a war. So, under Polk, things started to, move on to an upswing, and Taylor and Fillmore pretty much, inherited that.
Yeah.
On the basis of economy, I think we got to go Fillmore here.
Yeah, I would agree. Move on to the next hand. I've drawn Andrew Johnson.
And I have drawn William Howard Taft.
The category, relationship with the Constitution.
Man, these guys both... I think I'd give the edge to Taft, but I would make arguments for Andrew Johnson in a lot of cases here, because he literally tried to live his life strictly by the Constitution. He had himself buried with a copy of it. There's cartoons from Puck where they draw him as this parrot, and it's just saying Constitution, Constitution, Constitution. Mm-hmm. Everybody, it was a notable thing that he would just constantly be constitutionally in the Constitution it says. This was a guy that really knew the Constitution.
Yeah.
However, Taft, man, he was a pretty constitutional man, going on to become a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Unprecedented.
Yep. So I've said Taft became the first president to sit on the bench of the Supreme Court and the first Supreme Court justice to break the bench.
Yeah, that's a tough call because I think Johnson got himself into trouble with what I would say is like kind of bullshit. The Tenure of Office Act.
Yeah, he was impeached. I mean, the Republican Congress hated him because he wouldn't go along with their policies in general. But the specific thing they tried to impeach him on was for violating the Tenure of Office Act, which purported to require the president to get congressional approval to fire cabinet members, which Johnson
or anything like that.
Johnson believed, I think correctly, is unconstitutional.
Right.
And he fired
Edwin Stanton.
Anyway, and they impeached him over it.
Which was BS. They basically they didn't want him there.
Yeah.
And tried to get rid of him.
Yeah, that particular
they used that
thing.
as like a stupid kind of loophole to try and throw him out.
Yeah,
now,
I think that.
Did they have reasons for wanting him out of there? Well.
Yeah, I mean, nobody expected him to be president, and he wasn't going along with what was the majority opinion of the time.
No.
But he was probably, I mean, constitutionally right about the Tenure of Office Act.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, this is kind of a tough one. I mean, obviously, in order to become the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, you're going to know the fucking Constitution.
Yeah.
And you're going to know it probably close to verbatim, if anyone in the country ought to. It's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And I think Andy Johnson had like kind of a... He just constantly hearkened to the Constitution in his actions.
Yeah.
I'm going to push for a tie at this point.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
We can tie this hand, roll it over into the next hand.
Indeed.
Which I will draw Rutherford B. Hayes.
And I will draw Ulysses S. Grant.
Category, military accomplishments.
Well,
that's pretty clear.
yeah, that's a pretty clear one. I don't really...
Rutherford B. Hayes, yeah.
If you're listening to this show and you feel that we have to, like, delve into a discussion of this...
Well, Hayes served in the Civil War.
Indeed, and valiantly.
Grant, he had something to do with the Civil War, too, if I recall.
Yeah. A little something to do with, winning it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's really no question there, unfortunately. And, even if you wanted to bring in what was going on during their presidencies, like, there was still a military occupation of the South under Grant. Rutherford Hayes ended this and pretty much damned people of color in the South to decades of just... I can't even think of words. Jim Crow.
It wasn't just him. That was the deal that pretty much everybody made at the time he took office. But when Grant was in office, he was using the troops still in the South to try to enforce some civil rights.
Indeed.
Tried to let African Americans vote.
Yeah.
And,
we're going to dive into all this crap when we get into the post-Lincoln trilogy of presidents that dealt with Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And, it's not like Reconstruction just magically ended when Hayes withdrew troops from the South. But long story for another time. In this instance, Grant is going to take the hand.
Yep.
And therefore, the 4 cards go to me.
On the next hand, I'm drawing James Buchanan.
And I'm drawing Zachary Taylor.
The category, First Lady accomplishments.
First lady accomplishments. Okay.
Now,
well, here's the thing.
Well, I think we treat this category differently from First Lady looks as far as James Buchanan's concerned.
Well, I'm going to argue that we should, because Harriet Lane had one of the biggest First Lady accomplishments. That, she was literally the first to be called the First Lady.
Yeah. Yeah, Buchanan, of course, never married. His niece served as his First Lady. When we go First Lady looks, we don't count her because that's not a James Buchanan quote-unquote accomplishment.
That's right.
But here,
it's his niece.
Yeah.
And, she takes up the duties of White House hostess and performs admirably, and she is the first to be described as the First Lady. Harriet Lane. Before, they would say Mrs. Presidentis, different things of this nature.
Mm-hmm.
And
there were other
Margaret Taylor was never even lived in the White House. She didn't even get there, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't last very long in the presidency before he died.
No, I don't think she even moved in.
Let's see. I'm trying to look her up in the complete book of U.S. presidents. It says she was a semi-invalid, remained in seclusion on the second floor of the White House, leaving the duties of official hostess to her daughter, Mrs. Betty Bliss. On the sudden death of the president, her health deteriorated rapidly. Well, I guess you could also count her daughter Betty Bliss as part of First Lady duties.
Yeah.
I think this one will have to go to Buchanan and Harriet Lane.
I think it's going to go to Harriet Lane, absolutely.
Cool. Wasn't too hopeful when I turned over James Buchanan as my card.
Well, I mean, Harriet Lane's super important,
Yeah. Next hand, I've got Grover Cleveland, second term.
And I have drawn Barack Obama.
The category, First Lady looks.
Wow. Here we go. Frances Cleveland versus Michelle Obama.
Our listeners may recall Episode 3, Top 5 Presidential Cradle Robbers, number 1, Grover Cleveland, married the 21-year-old Frances Folsom in the White House.
Yeah, and she was on all kinds of products, and they did utilize her image.
Yeah, she was a extremely beloved First Lady.
That's true.
And she was pretty easy on the eyes.
Yeah, I think maybe the weight of history favors Frank Cleveland.
I mean, if we could see Michelle Obama when she was 21, maybe. I think that's an unfair advantage to Frances Cleveland.
Yeah, I suppose that is. So, yeah, this is going to go to Frances Folsom Cleveland.
Yeah, I think Michelle Obama probably definitely above average in First Lady looks.
Certainly.
One of the better looking First Ladies.
Certainly.
But
I think just like the history of it with Frank Cleveland.
Yeah, because nobody,
It was like the original It Girl.
Yeah, everyone loved. I mean, she ended up doing lots of important work and with charities and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think everyone immediately loved her at first because she was just this hot young broad.
You said hot young bride?
I said broad.
Oh.
But bride also works.
Okay. Well, yeah.
First Lady accomplishments. This would also be a good head-to-head matchup, but pure objectification is the call of this category.
And that's it. And we're going to give it to Old Grover.
Grover Cleveland taking that hand. Next hand, I've got John Adams.
And I have got Warren G. Harding.
Category, presidential looks.
Wow.
2 objectifying categories in a row.
Indeed. Well, I mean, Harding was always a pretty decent-looking guy.
Yeah,
And
he's a ladies' man.
The ladies, let him know it.
Oh, yeah.
He never had any problem. John Adams, he was just so wonderfully blessed to find Abigail.
Yeah.
They were so perfect for one another, and you know, I don't think as a young man John Adams was necessarily bad looking. It's just he was short, stocky,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Oh, he for a long time he just, in the tradition of the times, he would just keep his head shorn and wear the wigs.
Yeah.
It was only later on that he would actually that he actually grew his hair out, but he didn't have the, as you see with John Quincy too, that he didn't have there was quite a receding hairline there.
Yeah. Yeah, by the time he's president, he's a little more up there in weight. Got the nickname his rotundity as vice president.
That's right. Harding.
James T. Callender called Adams the hideous hermaphroditical character.
Yeah. Harding, not a bad looking guy.
No. Yeah, he's got some roguishly handsome good looks.
Yeah.
Got lots of ladies
His
in his time.
hair grayed early, but he had that jet black hair that it's super common that, it kind of grays earlier. And so, but it just made him look a little more distinguished.
Yeah.
He's arguably one of the dumbest presidents we've ever had.
Yeah, probably.
But his demeanor and looks and the way he spoke, he was just it was, you'd look at him and hear him talk and be like, this guy needs to be the president. Just as a figurehead.
Yeah.
I mean, he would have been a great monarch. Because just as a figurehead that didn't actually have to do anything, he probably would have been fantastic.
Having illegitimate children with mistresses, very monarchical.
Yeah, sure. That would have been his forte.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In any event, he's going to win this category.
Indeed. We'll move on. I've got Bill Clinton.
And I have got first term Cleveland.
The category, relationship with the media.
Oof. Well, first term Cleveland. Got married in the White House. And
oh, yeah.
was super popular. And Bill Clinton had numerous scandals and an impeachment.
He also, like Cleveland,
the Gingrich Revolution happened, and
like first term Cleveland, Bill Clinton also all over the media for a relationship with a girl in her early 20s.
Yeah,
but not as beloved for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's obviously the reason for that is he was a married man.
Yeah. I mean,
the president of the United States.
And the internet became big during his term. He was also victimized. That's how the Drudge Report became a thing, is because it broke the Monica Lewinsky story a day before the newspapers did, and new media, and all the late night host jokes about him.
Yeah, I mean, you had some classic Bill Clinton impersonators.
Yeah.
Phil Hartman's probably my favorite. Daryl Hannah, a great second.
Yeah, Daryl Hammond.
Daryl Hannah's an actress.
Yeah. She doesn't mean Bill Clinton herself.
Is that funny enough to keep in the show?
I think so.
If you say so.
Yeah, I mean, I think Clinton, he probably got, some good treatment with the media, too. He beat his impeachment. A lot of people think it was
Well, yeah, I mean, his
unjustified.
relationship with the media was fantastic, initially. I mean, he was super popular.
Yeah.
Him and Gore, like, young, they represented, like, the new generation, the people that are gonna lead us to the year 2000.
Yeah, he's, very charming, obviously.
I feel your pain.
He kind of mucked it up, though.
A little bit.
Probably give this category to Cleveland.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, Cleveland's first term, I mean, if it was Cleveland's second term, I would give it to Clinton, because Cleveland's second term, we had not so good times.
Yeah.
We had a depression, and he had he pretty well covered it up, but the cancer scare.
Yeah.
That, like, later on, a lot of media people were like, wow, what a fucking liar.
Yeah,
This son of a bitch could have been dying, and he, like, didn't let anybody know about it, and that's irresponsible for the president to...
Yeah, he's had secret surgery. What was it, like some kind of
he
mouth
had
cancer?
Cancer in his mouth, and they went in through the mouth and up into the top and cut out this big piece and replaced it with rubber. We'll get into all that. This was very, very secretly done out at sea.
Yeah.
And he's in a chair tied to the mast of a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty crazy shit, and we'll get into that in
our
Cleveland episodes, respectively.
At least he got away with it while he was president. Unlike some of the secretive things Bill Clinton left DNA evidence behind on.
That's true. So, yeah, I think this one's going to go to first-term Cleveland.
Yeah.
Again, like, the term splittage in Cleveland can be either a great boon or a failure.
Yeah. Someday we'll probably have Cleveland versus Cleveland head-to-head in a hand.
That would be interesting.
That'll be a good
first
day.
term wins almost every go.
Probably.
And next up we have Richard Nixon.
William McKinley.
And we got biggest partier. Nixon keeps... I swear we've had Nixon in this before.
Yeah, I think we did. Because I remember we talked about his drinking.
Maybe I'm thinking about Jackson. Maybe I think each of them have popped up twice on biggest partier.
Maybe.
In the history of presidential war.
The short but storied history.
Indeed. William McKinley...
I don't know. He
pretty
doesn't
well focused.
He doesn't look like a partier if you look at him in his pictures.
So in terms of McKinley's post-wedded life, there's not a lot of room for partying. He's taking care of his wife, and he's doing a fine job at it.
Yeah, it says in the complete book of U.S. presidents, he enjoyed the opera and the theater. He would play euchre or cribbage with his wife, smoke cigars, occasionally drank a glass of wine or scotch, but not much in the way of partying.
No. Nixon would get drunk.
Yeah.
I think this is a Nixon hand.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, there's just not much partying going on for William McKinley.
Next hand, I've drawn James A. Garfield.
And I have drawn Franklin Pierce.
The category, speeches and writings.
Well, I mean, I know of one, like, really good Franklin Pierce speech, and that was in his retirement after Lincoln's assassination. And actually, similar things happened to, I think, Millard Fillmore's people came to his house, too. But people showed up at Franklin Pierce's doorstep in his retirement in New Hampshire after Lincoln's assassination, and unfortunately, it's unrecorded what exactly he said to break up this mob and dissuade them and get them all to go back home. But from the accounts that exist, it was a really fantastic and patriotic plea for unity.
Yeah.
And it went over, like, super well. But other than that, I will say Franklin Pierce was the only president in history to extemporaneously deliver his inaugural address, and that is a huge fucking feat. He delivered his entire inaugural address from memory without the aid of notes. Nobody before or since has ever done that.
Wow.
So that's super. And it kind of says something for him, too, because I think a lot of it came from the heart. He begins, "You have summoned me in my weakness. You have sustained me with your strength."
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But outside of that, not too much. James A. Garfield, fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have here from his inaugural address, "The elevation of the Negro race from slavery to the full rights of citizenship is the most important political change we have known since the adoption of the Constitution of 1787. No thoughtful man can fail to appreciate its beneficent effect upon our institutions and people.
That's huge.
It has freed us from the perpetual danger of war and dissolution."
Huge.
Pretty good speech.
Indeed. And sadly, ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge Garfield fan. I mean, I think he was like a brilliant mind, and I still think that had he lived, he could have been one of the best presidents that we've had.
Yeah, that was a major missed opportunity.
Indeed. Like, I don't know, I think Franklin Pierce, he was known to be a dough face. That, for listeners that don't know, a dough face is a northern politician whose sympathies lie with southern interest. That was Franklin Pierce.
Yeah. Though, post-presidency...
He didn't exactly straddle the line.
No. Although he did stick with the Union as a post-president.
He did stick with the Union. We'll give him credit for that.
Doesn't look like either of these presidents have any books written by them, according to the complete
James
book.
A. Garfield actually kept, like, an extensive diary, but
Yeah?
as much as I've tried to look to find, like, even abridged, like, versions of it, I haven't been able to find anything. It's something that I want to write the Garfield home about, perhaps.
Yeah.
I'd love to read Garfield's diary.
Yeah, that would be cool.
But yeah, I think in this instance, we're going to give it to Garfield.
Yeah, I would agree.
Alright, and the next hand, I have flipped John Quincy Adams.
I've got James K. Polk.
And as to the category, we have who would win in a fight?
Oh.
That's actually really interesting.
Yeah, two, kind of smaller guys.
Yeah.
Known more for their intellects than their physical prowess.
JQA would have been the heavier of the two.
Yeah, let me
James
see.
K. Polk was almost like my measurements.
Yeah, let's see.
Like between 5'8" and 5'10", and he's between like 140, 150. And it's like ballpark exactly, pretty much Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
Yeah. JQA 5'7", 175 pounds.
So JQA's,
Health generally poor.
JQA's a little bit shorter. He's got a little bit more weight. Both of them had generally poor health, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting fight. I don't know, both of them, tenacious political fighters.
Indeed.
They'd both be writing about it in their diaries the next day.
JQA less likely to rein in his temper or passion, though?
No.
I'm going to say that for him.
Yeah.
He was the more fiery, where Polk would be incredibly pissed off on the inside, but he wouldn't do anything about it until he vented in his diary and said what a piece of shit such and such was, or how well, he wouldn't say what a piece of shit, but he'd say that they acted like unmanly, ignobly, you know, and all this kind of shit, and just like leave it for posterity to be like, yeah, this happened with such and such, and he reacted in this manner, which is totally disgraceful, and this and that.
Yeah.
Let's give it to John Quincy Adams on one basis. I know stories of both of these guys that involve water, and one of them comes out ahead. John Quincy Adams swam nude in the Potomac pretty much daily when he lived in Washington.
Yeah.
James K. Polk did not know how to swim. There is a story of a wagon creek fording that didn't go so well. I don't know if it was a creek or if it was a river. I'm going to say it was like a creek. And they got caught in a flash flood, and it didn't go so hot.
Yeah.
We'll delve into that in episode 11. So I think, I don't know. I mean, Christ, they're not fighting in the fucking water, though.
Well, I mean, JQA, he swam for exercise.
Yeah, I mean...
Did Polk get any regular exercise?
Not really. Polk's exercise consisted of, like, horseback riding. He considered it exercise.
I don't know.
And that's about it.
I think maybe that and a slight weight advantage on JQA might lean towards
I don't know. I think if JQA got one, like, good hit to the stomach on Polk, that'd probably be it.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, but, you know, I think JQA takes this one.
Yeah.
It was a good discussion.
It's a close fight.
Yeah.
Next hand, I've got George H.W. Bush.
And I've got his predecessor, Ronald Reagan.
Category, pre-presidential accomplishments.
Well, this is interesting. I mean, if not kind of one-sided in terms of actual importance, Ronald Reagan was a noted film actor.
Yeah.
And he was in some pretty cheesy stuff. I mean, The Lawman is a good one. He's a sheriff, and he's almost always a good guy.
Yeah.
In a lot of westerns and things like that. However, you have to watch the 1964 remake of The Killers that Don Siegel did with Lee Marvin. It's Ronald Reagan's last film role before he became governor of California, and he plays an incredibly convincing villain. It's a remarkably good role. He's fantastic in it. He slaps the shit out of Angie Dickinson at one point. Wow, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a really good role. And ironic that it was his last one before he got into politics. But yeah, he played a real fucking slime ball.
Yeah.
But he was the head of this gang.
Well, after he...
The Killers, of course, it was originally made in 1946. I think it was Robert Siodmak that directed that one. That was with Burt Lancaster. You had William Conrad as one of the two killers. That initial scene in the 1946 version was pretty much taken line for line from the Hemingway short story upon which the whole thing's based.
Cool.
Both versions take liberties more so in the 1964 version. Criterion Collection Film Buffs has a fantastic version of both. I got it. Why don't you?
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, you got John Cassavetes in there in the 64 version. Norman Fell. Mr. Roper is in it.
Wow.
Yeah, great flick.
Well, I guess after Reagan proved he could play a slime ball, it's like, all right, you're ready for politics.
You're ready for politics. Congratulations, Governor Reagan.
Yeah, and then he became governor of California.
That's right.
For what? Did he serve 8 years as governor, maybe? He also gave a very celebrated speech in favor of Barry Goldwater in 1964, where his speech was so good that he kind of made Goldwater look bad, because it's like, hey, what about this guy? And he became kind of a new star in the party.
And yeah, not to harken back to the war shots too much, but Goldwater was a bit of a nut.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little bit radical.
Well,
a little bit.
He had a good...
Just a little bit. I mean, I don't want to say he was a nut. That's not right. But he was a radical.
Yeah.
And Reagan comes and makes his speech, and it's like, wait a second here. You know, and it's important to remember, too, that Reagan had been a Democrat.
Yeah.
Until he got rich. That's pretty much when everybody shifts.
Yeah.
As soon as you were rich.
I think he became very anti-communist once the Cold War started kicking in.
No, that's
what made him.
That's the truth of it.
He ended up putting a more congenial face on the kind of Goldwater republicanism. Mm-hmm. Ended up taking it into the White House.
Yeah.
George H.W. Bush,
he was married to Jane Wyman. Is that a pre-presidential accomplishment?
Yeah, that counts.
And then he got married to Nancy Davis.
No.
That's another... I mean...
Well...
You know.
George H.W. Bush married Barbara Bush.
He did.
Not as good as the two women Reagan married. Well,
but no, I mean, we built up Reagan's
from an objectification
here a bit, but like they absolutely pale in comparison to the pre-presidential accomplishments of George Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah, I think we had him on this category in a previous episode. Yeah, he was a member of Congress, director of the CIA, chairman of the Republican National Committee.
Great ball player.
Yeah. Yale, College World Series.
War hero.
Yeah. Almost forgot about that. Pilot during World War II.
Fucking heroic. War hero.
He was a diplomat to China, and then
vice president.
One of the best vice presidents in terms of being a solid, loyal number two to Reagan, who he had run against. And
remember that great fight with him and Dan Rather? Look it up on YouTube, listeners. My God, it is heated. You're going to see Bush? Dan Rather and George H.W. Bush in a fucking screaming match with one another.
Is that when he was vice president?
Yeah. It's TV. It's like a piece of TV history.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
A lot of recommended viewing on the basis of this hand.
Absolutely, yeah. Check out the Dan Rather v. George H.W. Bush interview when he was the vice president. Let us know in the comments who you think won that particular debate. And also, let us know if you think that, you know, I mean, Rather was in control, so they could kind of just stop when they wanted to.
Yeah.
Could it have gone on? Who was right?
Who would win in a physical fight, George Bush or Dan Rather?
I don't know. Rather's a scrapper, isn't he?
Yeah, he could be.
You never know. You never know.
The great what-ifs of history.
Indeed. But I think this is no what-if. I think George H.W. Bush takes this hand.
Yep.
Great discussion. That's what this game's all about.
Mm-hmm. Next hand, I've got Franklin D. Roosevelt.
And I've got George W. Bush following his father here.
The category, Best President Overall.
Not following his father and winning the hand, I'm afraid.
Not quite.
No. Not even close.
FDR.
Not even close. Okay, all of FDR's socialist experiments that failed and didn't actually do anything to curb the Depression when the war happened, which our side was already chosen. You know, come on. Give me a break. we were going to support England.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Obviously.
The side was chosen. There was no, he kept us out of war with FDR as there was with Wilson so much. But you knew where it was going anyway. And so did the Japanese. So it was like, it was going to happen. And that's what it took to curb the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like, all right, well, none of this experimentation really is working. Obviously, we're going to support England and France. Let's just try not to make it too blatant, because if something happens, we'd have to join the war.
Mm-hmm.
And that might fix the Depression.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going a little bit too far, but come on now.
Well, some of the, I mean, I like at least at the beginning of his term when they put like a banking freeze on that kind of helped stop some of the bank crashes.
Oh no, I'm defending Roosevelt. I think he should win.
I know. I agree.
I'm saying
I'm
like
giving
he very cleverly, you know,
I'm giving him a little bit of credit
got
for
us involved in
managing the Depression.
An international conflict. I'm not saying he planned for Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's what he expected to happen. But it was no different than when the Lusitania was sunk.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, we were helping them out, and something happened, and Americans got killed.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have to join the war. So it's like, well, if we weren't helping at all, maybe it wouldn't have happened. If we were actually the neutral as we claimed, perhaps this wouldn't have happened. But we're doing these things, and it's like, well, how blatant can we get with this? Are we going to let ourselves get, I don't know.
Well, we
It's
had
tough.
we had the Lend-Lease program.
Once war happened, FDR was a badass.
Yeah.
It's Roosevelt's third term that is like his masterpiece.
Yeah.
That's the thing that makes him one of the greatest presidents of all time. It's his third term.
Yeah, if he'd only served 2 terms, he probably wouldn't be remembered as that great of a president.
Being very good.
But he turned it around at the end.
I don't think if FDR only had the first 2 terms, and say Wendell Willkie won in 1940, Roosevelt would, no question about it, be lower than many, many others in the presidential ranking scale that he eclipses. Because FDR in these presidential ranking scales, he's consistently top 5.
Yeah.
He's almost consistently top 3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no question there. I mean, George W. Bush, do I even want to get into it?
I mean, our listeners lived through George W. Bush's presidency.
Yeah, I don't... And if you're a young kid, you weren't missing too much. And if you're a young kid, where are your parents? Are you listening to this fucking shit?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, FDR takes the hand.
Yep. Yeah. Our listeners born 2009 or later. That's a big demographic among the Dead Presidents podcast.
Awesome.
Next stand I've drawn Lyndon Baines Johnson.
What was the demographic?
Oh, people born after Bush's presidency, 2009 to now.
2009.
12-year-olds and under.
Yeah. Well,
if you're a grade school history teacher who's looking to sit back and not talk during class, put on the Dead Presidents podcast for your 4th graders. They're going to fucking love it.
Well, yeah, I think that, yeah. Anyway, we got Lyndon Baines Johnson going up against James Monroe in the category of
domestic policy.
Well, Well, no. This one's... It's not in Monroe's favor, so.
No, Monroe
Monroe
very
is a
successful foreign policy.
president.
LBJ...
Domestic policy, we mentioned it in this game.
Yeah.
There's a depression that goes down during Monroe. Yeah, it's the era of good feelings and everything, and all that, but...
Yeah. Whereas LBJ, disastrous foreign policy president as far as Vietnam goes.
And we don't want to, let's separate this off the bat, because I could see people saying, well, the domestic policy, there were so many pissed off people, they were on the White House grounds. Those people were...
They're mad about
against the foreign policy. Yeah. LBJ's domestic policy, how about, a little bit of credit for trying to push some civil rights stuff through.
Yeah. Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, Medicare and Medicaid passed.
Well, I think the reason that I was hesitant a little bit in my delivery there was, but it's not Johnson's fault that some of these decisions were not received well in certain sections of the country. And there was a lot of violence.
Civil rights decisions? Yeah, I mean...
And there's a lot of violence and a lot of bloodshed.
Yeah, so passing these things and taking a stand in the face of that kind of opposition, even more credit to him.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, what I had just said was that the passages of that spurred some shit.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of death, a lot of waste, a lot of just the most loathsome and disgusting kind of behavior.
But a big step to even pass those acts. Some of his domestic policies, Medicare and Medicaid, war on poverty, probably ended up costing a lot more money than would people expect. Didn't magically, the war on poverty still occurring. It was not a win, so to speak, but it's something. He's at least trying. He has a lot of major domestic legislation and shit happened.
Yeah. I mean, I would give it to Johnson in this.
Yeah, I mean, Monroe's big domestic policy, besides the Panic of 1819, the Missouri Compromise.
Yeah, and I guess to its credit, it put off shit for 30 years.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah. Certainly didn't solve anything.
No, not at all.
He did probably the only thing he could have done.
And if you think it was like some magical thing that there was never any issue whatsoever along, come on. But, law of the land for 30 years.
Yeah. Well, we're going to give this hand to LBJ.
Indeed.
And we're going to move on to the next hand where I've got Calvin Coolidge.
And I have got Benjamin Harrison.
The category, least scandals.
Well, these were two scandal-free presidents.
Yeah.
Pretty much completely. Totally completely. I don't know of any scandals for either of them. Coolidge, certainly not, because he was righting the wrongs of the Harding administration, and kudos to him for that. Coolidge really cleaning up after Warren Harding, and then some, going above and beyond. A fantastic president.
Well, with Harrison, I guess I don't think it was a scandal publicly, but the little scandal within,
if you're going to bring up the
presidential
cradle robber thing, I mean...
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of, is Harrison was on our. He was what, number 3 on our top 5 presidential cradle
I
robbers.
believe so.
His wife's niece lived in the White House.
That's right.
And
they openly flirted with one another, and it pissed his wife off.
Yeah, the first lady wanted her gone, and the president would not let her leave. And then after the first lady died, he ended up marrying her. That was not till after his presidency.
To the horror of his children.
Yeah, their children were horrified by that. But even while he's president, he's keeping her niece around against the first lady's objections.
Yeah, that's kind of...
I think that's enough of a scandal to...
Well, he had no chance.
Give this hand to Coolidge.
If that hadn't happened.
Yeah, Coolidge's major scandal, the White House raccoons keep escaping.
That's it. Yeah, Coolidge was cleaning shit up. He was anti-scandal, and it goes to him.
Yeah. We'll move on to the next hand. I've got John F. Kennedy.
And I've got Gerald Rudolph Ford.
The category, who would you most like to meet?
If I could hang out with either one of them?
Yeah.
Are we going to bring setting into it?
Well,
am I going to go hang out with JFK and, fuck a bunch of, Hollywood dames and, smoke weed and drink?
Yeah, I mean, you can. Yeah, I think we should be able to do whatever we want with this category. I think I'd agree, yeah. JFK, got down.
But, I mean, if it was, lame, oh, you're going to meet the President of the United States, I'd be like, ugh. I mean, with Kennedy.
Even then, I'd
he'd be phony in that setting.
Yeah.
I'd like to cut loose with the real JFK.
Yeah.
A bunch of Hollywood.
Yeah. I mean, you
babes.
could get together with Ford. You could, watch a Michigan football game.
Oh, yeah, I'd love that.
Probably have some drinks with Betty Ford. But then with JFK, you'll be, in the hot tub with some interns. And be, with the...
JFK,
nitrous
Phil,
oxide.
Faddle, and myself.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, I gotta go JFK.
Yeah, me too.
Just if you could bring the setting into it, yeah. I just think that would be so much more wild.
Yeah.
It's like Marilyn Monroe and Marlene Dietrich and Jane Mansfield and all these people.
Yeah.
Angie Dickinson.
Yeah, JFK.
There's a lot of rumored ones.
Mm-hmm. Number 1 presidential adulterer from episode 2.
Another thing, too, is I would definitely show him up knowing that Marlene Dietrich has said on record that JFK was so quick, she barely even remembered it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it would just basically be a party for me while the President of the United States is like, this son of a bitch is showing me up in the bed.
Yeah. Or maybe, maybe while JFK's in the hot tub with some interns, you could go up the presidential bedroom. Jackie will be all by herself up there.
Depends on what actresses are there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to let JFK win this hand.
Well, that took a pretty lewd, dirty, and sexist turn. We're giving it to JFK and moving on.
I've got Chester Arthur.
And I have got Martin Van Buren.
The category, relationship with Congress. Well, Van Buren didn't have that great a relationship with Congress.
Yeah.
He did not get
No.
much of his stuff done.
He was one that was more deserving of a better presidency, whereas Chester Arthur deserved to have a really shitty presidency and maybe get assassinated, because up to that point he had just been pretty much a corrupt machine politician, part of the spoil system, and had no business becoming the president. But then when he did become president, he made a full 180 and actually, I think, redeemed himself and did a fine job and was able to do some things. Really.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, Arthur, as far as Congress goes, he has some legislative accomplishments. The Pendleton Act, creating the modern civil service system.
This was huge.
That's huge.
The president had just been killed by a nutty office seeker. And this tried to help with that kind of shit. Because do you realize how open the president was up until this point? Unbelievably so.
Mm-hmm.
Polk's diary, there's not a day that goes by that he doesn't have people just coming in.
Yeah.
He has visiting hours.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to deal with every dopey son of a bitch that comes in there. It was really easy to get to the president.
Yeah, even after Lincoln was killed, they didn't.
No,
they didn't do that much.
Not too awful much. But yeah.
Arthur also passed a tariff, passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, working together with Congress to limit Chinese immigration.
Yeah, that's kind of questionable, I guess.
Well, he had a good relationship with Congress as far as getting it done, at least.
Well, yeah.
He vetoed the Rivers and Harbors Act for internal improvements and had Congress override the veto. But apparently, according to the Complete Book of U.S. Presidents, Arthur drew widespread praise for having attempted to thwart that pork barrel spending.
Yeah.
Polk also vetoed the Rivers and Harbors Act as well.
Yeah. Well, and another thing to Chester Arthur's credit is he started to take some more work that Grant started in terms of national parks.
Yeah.
Took a Western tour.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he did a lot of work for like national parks and stuff, following in Grant's footsteps, and then all of their work would be realized and even just tripled or more by Teddy Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would give him credit there as well. So I think this hand goes to Chester Arthur.
Yeah. Yeah, Van Buren, the Whigs, majorly took over Congress after the midterm election, I think. He finally got the independent treasury that he wanted passed, but then it was immediately repealed after he left office.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll have Chester Arthur take this hand.
And next up, we're going to have John Tyler
versus Harry Truman in the category of foreign policy.
Okay, well. Now, let's start simple. John Tyler, foreign policy. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty. The annexation of Texas.
Recognition
the Treaty of Wangia.
Open relations with China. Recognized the independence of Hawaii. Started
That's right.
Good relationship with Hawaii.
Yeah.
John
and
Tyler.
Of course, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty settled some border disputes up in Maine over.
Yeah, from Maine over to Minnesota at least, averting war with Britain. John Tyler underrated as far as foreign policy accomplishments.
Indeed. And although Texas annexation would not necessarily bear fruit until the Polk administration, I give John Tyler credit for it.
Yeah, he ended up in his last days in office signing off on it.
Now, Harry S. Truman's foreign policy. We got the end of World War II.
Yeah. The victory of World War II.
We got
all the
Korean War.
Yep.
And the beginnings of the Cold War. There's a lot going on with Truman and foreign policy here.
Yeah. You know, we got the creation of the United Nations,
Right.
the Marshall Plan, the Nuremberg trials, the occupation and partition of Germany.
There is a hell of a lot going on here. Harry Truman, another one, and this is, I feel, is a common thread with two-term presidents, is the second term is always less successful than the first.
Yeah.
Truman was another one like that. And his successor, Eisenhower, same thing.
Yeah.
But I cannot take away credit for Harry S. Truman's foreign policy.
Yeah, the whole, you know, setting up the whole post-war, you know, whole new world order at the time, ending the war and, you know, winning the peace in a lot of ways, and at least setting us up.
Yeah, and
For the
remember
Cold
when we
War.
talked about presidential appointments, and it was Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale came up, and we talked about like how he kind of like changed the game of the vice presidency, because before that they were like kind of coming into it in the dark.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's super important to bring up right here, is that Harry Truman kind of like got blindsided with all of this fucking shit when nobody ever expected him to become president. It's like, okay, so we got this going on. And he's probably like, holy fuck. And yet he did as well as he did.
Yeah.
So, like, that's another thing, like, I think pretty hugely in his favor.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think John Tyler, a very successful foreign policy president, but
And
Truman...
underrated, as we said,
Yeah.
like, definitely underrated. I just don't think that he can live up to Harry S. Truman.
Yeah, Truman has so many things that are just so huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, Truman's going to take the cake here.
indeed.
We are down to our final two hands.
That's right.
I've drawn Jimmy Carter.
And I have drawn William Henry Harrison, and we have the category Effect on the Office of the Presidency. Well, I think this one has to go a certain way for some pretty just obvious reasons, and basically lucky reasons if you happen to draw William Henry Harrison with this category. Because his death alone had a huge effect on the future of the presidency. Now, John Tyler is better here, but just by dying, Harrison had a bigger effect on the presidency than did Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
For what he did.
Yeah, at least on the office, you know, itself going forward.
You know, and like that's another thing. When we talked about, I remember arguing about positive and negative effect, and I think it's just the effect. I just for better or worse, the effect that they had needs to be the thing that is the final line.
Well, the Harrison death and Tyler succession ultimately strengthened the office of the presidency.
Well, that's it.
And even before he died, he was standing up to Henry Clay and some of the party who wanted to weaken the presidency in general.
Sure.
Between Harrison and then Tyler, that effort was kind of stopped in its tracks.
The Whigs were kind of hoping to have a figurehead
Yeah.
that was in the mold of people like Washington and Jackson. They wanted a Jackson figure, but not a Jackson temperament. They couldn't wield, he couldn't be reined in.
Yeah,
There's no controlling Andrew Jackson. They wanted Jackson image, but somebody that they could kind of mold.
Yeah, but Harrison didn't seem to be going for that, and Tyler definitely
not
did
at all.
not.
Basically, Harrison says to Henry Clay,
Hey, Clay, what did Socrates say about Plato?
You don't know what.
put the lid on it or it'll dry up after 3 days. But as for
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter's effect on the presidency, I mean, he did not have a great presidency. I think he tried admirably as best he could to do certain things, but his focus was not as 50-50 as it should have been, because there were problems at home that were really, really bad, that were seemingly getting overlooked
Yeah.
in favor of trying to make peace in the Middle East, which is a daunting task, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't think he had a major effect on the office itself.
No, I mean, he was a one-term president, a great human being, as we've often said, but I think I got to give this one to William Henry Harrison.
I agree.
And even if it's just for dying,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, he had to die to do it.
Yep. He
Martyr
gave
in terms of that hand.
he gave his last full measure
Yeah,
of
William
devotion
Henry
to
Harrison
win that
gave
hand
his life
for
to
Stephen
win
Lincoln
that
Douglas.
hand.
And the last hand, I have drawn Herbert Hoover.
And I have drawn George Washington. I think these two have come head-to-head before.
Well,
I believe they have.
this time they're going head-to-head in the category of relationship with the people.
Oh boy. Well, there is absolutely no question here. We'll just give a refresher course real quick. Just one sec. The people loved George Washington.
They didn't really
And
care for Herbert
when
Hoover.
Herbert Hoover was president,
They weren't having it.
yeah, as president, Washington had some problems. However, it's few and far between to what Hoover had to deal with. And that's not just because there was a larger population when Hoover was president.
Yeah, the
The Great
people love
Depression,
Washington.
making the Great Depression worse. The deplorable, unforgivable violence against the Veterans Bonus March. Just absolutely unforgivable. And it's surprising that he was able to recover from that.
Yeah, and Hoover
in my
came
opinion.
in before the Depression. The Republican Party was dominant. Other than when TR and Taft split the Republican Party, allowing Wilson to win, the Republicans had been winning hands down. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
Hoover won in a
even
landslide.
I think maybe FDR or someone pre-presidency was like, are Democrats ever going to get a chance here? There needs to be some kind of disaster to knock the Republican dominance off. And
Well, and that's exactly what happened.
That happened.
When Hoover ran for president, he ran against Alfred E. Smith, whose biggest handicap was that he was a Catholic.
Mhm.
But yeah, relationship with the people here, there's no question. It goes
Yeah.
to George Washington.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody could beat Washington in this category. It's certainly not Hoover.
It seems absolutely unlikely that anybody could beat him here.
Yeah, even the kind of things that towards the end of his term where, the Jay Treaty was not totally well received. And I think a lot of people even would, not blame Washington personally. People would be like, oh, it's Hamilton and
Or it's Jefferson.
it's people below him are, doing it.
Right.
Nobody could get away with, attacking Washington personally.
Yeah, there's nobody that could beat Washington in that category. Certainly not. And that's going to bring us to the end of the game.
We'll tally the cards and see who won. And we've scored the game. I have 24 cards,
I have 20.
and I have 1.
I feel like this is becoming habitual.
Yeah, I
But
think
also becoming habitual You're learning.
Yeah. I'm 4-0 in these games, but you know who else is 4-0? The listeners.
That's right, and that's the most important aspect. The listeners will always be the number one winners in our books. It is you who benefit from this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Exactly. This has been Presidential War.
Thanks for listening.